The third edition of Bolt Action and the 2025 version of Conflict 47 have very similar rules, and so rather than having a massive roster of Conflict 47 units, you can use some Bolt Action units in your Conflict 47 games. This video will explain how that works, having Bolt Action units in your Conflict 47 army, and also go further than that and look at what happens if you try and have an army from Bolt Action fight a Conflict 47 army. There are a lot of nuances you may not be aware of. So this video will cover what a Bolt Action unit is compared to a Conflict 47 unit, the 3 rule sources for using Bolt Action units in Conflict 47, 2 different ways to make a Bolt Action versus Conflict 47 battle work, how it works with the Armies of Italy expansion, how it works with nations that don't have an Armies of book, how best to win with Bolt Action units against Conflict 47, and why on earth you would want to do this. We've got to start with the definitions, otherwise a lot of it's not going to make sense. So we're explaining how to have Bolt Action units in your Conflict 47 army, and for that we've got to define what a Bolt Action unit is. The easiest way to see this is on the app. There are different flag symbols for the Bolt Action version, which you'll be familiar with from history, and the Conflict 47 version has its own symbol for the nation. That's how to easily tell on the app. Or if you're not using the app, if you look at the Conflict 47 PDF for your faction, like Axis or Commonwealth, if the unit is in that PDF, it is a Conflict 47 unit. A rifle squad may be made from a Bolt Action kit, but if you're using the rules from the Conflict 47 PDF, it's a Conflict 47 unit. The Matilda II is in the Armies of Great Britain book, so that is a Bolt Action unit. If you use the Cruiser Cromwell with medium anti-tank gun and coaxial medium machine gun from the Armies of Great Britain book, that is a Bolt Action unit. If you use a Cromwell T with medium anti-tank gun and coaxial medium machine gun from the Conflict 47 Commonwealth PDF, it's a Conflict 47 unit. When you're making a Conflict 47 army and you want to include your Bolt Action units, there are 3 places to look for the rules. In the core Conflict 47 rules, in the PDFs of each Conflict 47 faction, and in the Warlord Games app. Unfortunately, the rules are not consistent between the 3, but we'll get into that. On page 164 under Force Selection in the Conflict 47 rulebook, incorporating Bolt Action units. If both players agree, you can incorporate units from the various Bolt Action Armies of supplements or official army lists into games of Conflict 47. In very simple terms, you can use Bolt Action units, and it's very open as to which ones. In each of the PDFs for Conflict 47 that gives you the army lists, there it has a limit or restriction or narrowing of which units you can use. So in the Commonwealth army list, it says incorporating Bolt Action units. If both players agree, they may use units taken from the Bolt Action Armies of Great Britain 3rd edition in their list. See the page 164 of the Conflict 47 rulebook. Then it is recommended, not required, but recommended that any units taken be identified as late war in Armies of Great Britain. And for the purposes of platoon selections, any infantry unit from the Armies of Great Britain counts as a basic infantry for the purposes of the Conflict 47 platoon selectors. So in an assault platoon, you still need your 2 advanced units before you can take any basic units. But these PDFs are saying you can use late war units. There is more of a limit. Whereas the Warlord Games app, when you're making a Conflict 47 army, it lets you use any of the units from the Bolt Action Armies of Great Britain book. When you're using these units, you don't get any of the Bolt Action army rules, like you don't get for King and Country. So you won't be modifying units to be a Guards Regiment or Chindits, but that doesn't stop you taking the Chindit section. This is usually so you can have more of a particular theme to your army. In Conflict 47, until it expands, there isn't a lot of sub-factions. Like we have the Totenrot, where you can have the Totenrot platoon, then you can have a zombie Axis army, which is a distinct theme, and there's a platoon specifically for that. The Fireflies of the Americans can have their own platoon. You can have an army of all Fireflies. Other factions don't have this, so if you wanted to represent the British Commonwealth in the jungles of Myanmar, and you're fighting the Japanese, you might want to take some Chindits units. It feels a bit more odd to have the Conflict 47 no Nazis Germany and then add in some SS troops. It goes against one of the core lore parts of Conflict 47. Or you could not think about it and gun down some Nazis. Or they have some silly lore, like they're trying to get Hitler's mustache and Himmler's glasses and use their DNA to make a two-headed eagle zombie or some Resident Evil monster. That fits the theme. Using more bolt-action units, you could represent a resistant German faction or an independently operating German faction within the Axis. Think of Allo Allo, a British TV program about a French village or French town occupied by corrupt Germans with a French cafe owner who is trying not to get shot by the Germans or by the French resistance and who's trying to keep everything normal so he can get back to having an affair. If you had German troops, maybe the intelligence they seek on the battlefield is the location of the painting of the fallen Madonna with the big boobies. They want to secure it before the Axis Green Vault can put it in their vault. The colour of this particular vault is unknown. So there's a lot of fun to be had. Now both the core rules and the army list say, if both players agree. The app doesn't mention this, but it's as easy as saying, I'm bringing some non-Conflict 47 tanks, or I'm using bolt action units. It's more a rule of, don't be that particular guy, don't be a pain and bring difficult units from bolt action that are the same as ones from Conflict 47, but are cheaper or are better versions for the same points. That should be a rule regardless. Don't be a pain and fight with only Schrecken wolves, as that is a violation against humanity and decency. I don't think you're a bad person if you turn up to a Conflict 47 game with a pair of Matildas alongside your automatons. In fact, I'm right there with you. Conflict 47 players are generally very open. If both players agree, well, I've never met a bolt action or Conflict 47 person who didn't think that was okay. Events will have their own limits to impose if they like only use the app, or follow the PDF restrictions, or even no bolt action units. That's up to them. No clue about how tournaments work. I assume that the tournaments will have their own rules pack to say if you can use bolt action units or not. Some Conflict 47 units cost too much compared to bolt action units, and even within Conflict 47, some units have a very similar points to their bolt action counterparts that don't perform nearly as well in Conflict 47. I don't have a massive problem with it. Balance is not a great issue in Conflict 47. I initially thought that the British Commonwealth lacked enough armour penetration to fight the Axis, but that turned out not to be true. It is the Rift War. Adapt. Don't expect the universe or 100 balance patches to fix it all for you. Conflict 47 doesn't have that constant competitive feel online compared to Games Workshop systems where they deliver monthly core rules and point changes that get the community into a state of constantly looking at what is too strong, what is too many points, and the penalties don't match the reality of your games. I like the more relaxed Conflict 47 style, and that is why even if it doesn't work perfectly, the community is willing to easily and slightly modify the rules to allow fun. If you're looking for one such community, the pictures of villages I've been showing off in this video are from the Mid-Atlantic Bolt Action Association, located in and around Maryland, DC, the Virginia metro area. There's a link to their Discord and Facebook in the description. And if you'd like to play on the particular terrain, on the 18th of April 2026 at Bazooka Games in Westminster, Maryland, they're holding their next tournament, Operation Amherst. New players are welcome. As mentioned on page 164 of the core rules, if there's any rules conflict or unusual situations, this is where talking to your opponent ahead of the game before making an army can help. Then you can figure out a solution. Like if a rule in bolt action for a unit lets you take a number of that unit based on the number of rifle platoons in the army, well, there's no rifle platoons in Conflict 47, but as a rifle platoon is the basic platoon, swap that terminology for assault platoon, the basic, mandatory Conflict 47 platoon, or any of the other mandatory platoons. Like you could have a Totenrot platoon and count that as a rifle platoon, because it's the mandatory one. So how does it work with various factions that have been amalgamated into the Axis in Conflict 47? What about the Italians? What about the Hungarians? They became part of the greater Axis in Conflict 47 lore and in the rules. Sort of. Italy's an interesting one for the Second World War because they're on both sides. The specialist Italians in Conflict 47 currently exist in two places to represent the two Italys. One is within the Axis and has the Legio Aquila squad and one kind of power armor unit. Another is with the British Commonwealth and has a different power armored unit. There's Roman gladiators versus Roman legionaries in style. You could represent an Italy in Conflict 47 through these units only. The rifle squads are generic Italian rifle squads, and the Axis Nachtjägers represent your Italian grandmother if you say you've had enough to eat. That's one way. We have the upcoming Armies of Italy book, and there's been an update to the Axis PDF to say, if you're using bolt action rules, you can use units from the Italian Republican Army Late War Selection Guide. Then you choose your preferred mix of units from the Axis Conflict 47 PDF and the Armies of Italy book. The Italian units from the Armies of Italy book won't get the benefit of any of the Axis rules, apart from the buzzsaws. While that buzzsaws rule is something that's in the Armies of Germany book, and then in the Axis rules for Conflict 47, it applies to all units in an Axis Conflict 47 army. You can assume that by 1947, the Italians had been given sufficiently better machine guns, something that their southern Italian opponents won't get. If you wanted to represent the Italians on the side of the Allies, use the Italian units from the Commonwealth PDF, like the Italian Bersaglieri squad, and Italian units from page 94, the co-belligerent army of the Armies of Italy book. Now that isn't how it's described as working in the Commonwealth PDF. For now it only mentions being able to take units from the Armies of Great Britain book, not the Armies of Italy book. This could be updated at a future point, as it could be updated to include other upcoming books. So to have the co-belligerent force and some Italian units from the Commonwealth PDF, you would have to take a more general, core rules approach to the Allied system. Yeah, we can use bolt action units. You have the freedom with the fluid wording on page 164 of the core rules to have the Italian Allied army that you want. Right now, the app doesn't seem to allow adding bolt action Italians to the Axis army. Presumably when the book is released in April 2026, then the Italian units will appear on the Conflict 47 app for the Axis. So once again, it depends on which version of the rules you're using as to how Italian your armies can be. I would go with the most open one, for fun. Now on that page 164, it says you can use the bolt action Armies of supplements and the official army lists. So if you wanted to have an Axis Bulgarian army or Hungarian army, there is a bolt action PDF. The rules in that bolt action PDF say you can use one German or Italian unit that isn't veteran, and the vehicle cannot have a defense value of more than 10 plus, and it cannot be one of the platoon's mandatory units. It's very much an add-on. If you took that, just a bolt action army list, and then tried to add one unit of the Axis to take that as a theme that they have no veteran troops, that's limiting your Conflict 47 units, as many quintessential units are veteran by default. The Schwertruppen squad is an option. If I'm pronouncing these wrong, at least the names are on screen for you to see. Or, although not exactly an Armies of, they are an official army list, so qualify as allies. Though not under the strict rules of the Axis PDF. To be thematic, even though the Conflict 47 Axis PDF doesn't mention them, if you wanted a Bulgarian Axis army, take the CV-33 tankette and other basic Bulgarian units alongside your Totenkor and Nachtjägers to fight the invading Soviets. I don't see why not. That takes the spirit of the rules and applies them to the nations that don't have an Armies of book in 3rd edition bolt action. I hope that when the bolt action Commonwealth book comes out, that the Conflict 47 British Commonwealth PDF gets updated to mention also taking units from that book, since that's what they did with the Axis PDF with the Armies of Italy book. That covers the basics of adding bolt action units to Conflict 47 armies that will see most players through. Now what if you wanted to have a bolt action army fight a Conflict 47 army? I see two ways to have a bolt action army fight against a Conflict 47 army. And it does so under the expectation that you're playing the Conflict 47 core rules, which are slightly different to the bolt action rules. The main change is that the Rift dice are added to Rift units. Following that page 164 rule, if there are weapons or rules that are present in the Conflict 47 rulebook, you should use the Conflict 47 rulebook version instead of the bolt action version. If it's not mentioned there as a rule, use the bolt action version. The first way to have a bolt action army play a Conflict 47 army is to build a bolt action army using the Conflict 47 platoon structure. This is how the Warlord Games app has it already inbuilt. Your first platoon will be an assault platoon, but for that you need advanced infantry. The army list section says that bolt action units count as basic infantry. The assault platoon, the standard platoon needed to play Konflikt 47, requires 2 specialist or advanced infantry squads. Not all of them are rift monsters. The Commonwealth Grenadiers unit is a very familiar unit, and if you skip the Tesla cannon, then they're pretty normal. The Daughters of the Motherland in the Soviet faction are also pretty standard humans. The app can help you so far, but really as long as you have the Konflikt 47 rulebook, the Armies of book, like the Armies of Great Britain, and the free Konflikt 47 army list from the Warlord Games website, you'll be able to work through it. The other way of doing this is to follow the bolt action army construction. In that case, you will use purely bolt action army construction rules and use the national rules like for king and country. I would say, in that case, let the bolt action player use the bolt action army rules as their force works better for them. Otherwise, if you're playing the Konflikt 47 army rules, at least half of the faction rules bonuses won't work, like the Axis Hand of the Green Vault that does nothing if you don't have any rift units. And there's no benefit to the gravity guns if you have no gravity guns. This may not be the intended way to do it. If you're playing Konflikt 47 even with bolt action units, it's assumed that you would be playing using all of the Konflikt 47 army construction rules. But honestly, it works fine. It lets a bolt action player with a bolt action army list play against a Konflikt 47 army without having to rethink and rewrite an army list. Then you play a Konflikt 47 game. If there's a rule in bolt action that says you can do something, use that rule. If there's the same rule in Konflikt 47, you use that version of the rule because you're playing Konflikt 47. A sort of third idea would be to have a bolt action army using the bolt action army rules and some Konflikt 47 units. It could work. You keep using rift dice for those units, but there's no Konflikt 47 PDF army rules, and only a few of the bolt action army rules would end up applying to them. Of course, the Mark 1 automatons don't have for king and country, so they can't become commandos. But if you're including at least 2 Konflikt 47 infantry units, it sounds like you want to do version 1. Play a Konflikt 47 army with an assault platoon and regular infantry beyond that. On page 162 of the Bolt Action Core rulebook, 3rd edition, a standard bolt action game is 1,000 requisition points. A standard Konflikt 47 game is 1,500 points because rift units are generally more expensive. Pick one or the other as you are comfortable. If the bolt action player has a 1,000 point bolt action army, it's usually easier to have the Konflikt 47 player lower their points. When it comes to scenario rules, I would slightly change some scenario rules. I don't recommend playing kill point missions, because if the Konflikt 47 player walks at the bolt action player with damage value 7+ units, and the bolt action player is at best equipped to fight enemy veterans with a 5+ damage value, you will not have a great time. Even if there were some units that could fight, at least half the army would spend the game hiding because it's near impossible to hurt the enemy. Not having kill points and having objectives that you need to take works better. So how does a bolt action player win against the horrors of the rifts? My recommendation is that you need to bring down the monsters in the vehicles. And what can you use? Bring tanks with light anti-tank guns, not for enemy tanks, but for rift units. Sometimes the bolt action vehicles can be better than the rift vehicles, a little bit cheaper and they act very similar. I use a Matilda 2, the Roald Dahl sequel you didn't know existed, but in tank form. A good early war tank that can fight a Panzer III or Panzer IV, but is too slow to get to the rear of a Tiger tank. It was used throughout World War II, and in the Armies of Great Britain, it's listed as being early, mid, and late war, so it follows the recommendation that you use late war vehicles. But in reality, you can use any unit because it's only a recommendation, and in Konflikt 47, the rules of reality no longer apply. Anti-tank cannons work well against the heavy rift infantry, so you need the cannons to shoot the Soviet bear soldiers and the Axis werewolves. Please shoot the Axis werewolves. Unfortunately, it's one shot hitting on a 4+, but I can get +1 to hit against enemy vehicles with the cannon, like the Vogel spinners, because of the anti-tank rule. The Matilda can also fire high explosives, which can destroy the closely packed Axis or Japanese zombies. And it has the armor to resist 1 armor penetration that the casual infantry mounted rift weapons have. It's 9+ armor. Unless it is veteran, I can still take pin markers from Pen 1 weapons, so maybe the Matilda will be veteran. I love the Matilda. Men will see this tank and literally type Queen. The box comes with the most up-to-date rules for Bolt Action 3, which of course matches its rules in Conflict 47. It's really useful to have the stat card right there. That's another thing Games Workshop needs to learn from Warlord games, but Games Workshop changes their rules so often, perhaps too often, that it would be pointless. Aside from taking a Matilda, your Bolt Action infantry units want anti-tank weapons, again, for taking on enemy Rift units, not necessarily for tanks. Platoon commanders can have a Panzerfaust or faction equivalent. All models in the unit must have one if you have them, but an officer is a unit of one. Not always, but one. And usually you can only fire one per activation anyway, so it may as well be on a unit of one. This is on the standard Conflict 47 platoon commander, not a Bolt Action platoon commander, but you may want to use the Conflict 47 platoon commander, they're functionally the same. It depends which version of Conflict 47 versus Bolt Action you were doing. The drawback is a 12-inch range and having to expose an easily killed model to the enemy. And as you are moving, you probably hit on a 5+. If you need more anti-tank or anti-rift, that's a cheap option. You may think not of killing the enemy, but of pinning them while your cheaper units run around. But against enemies in power armor with a defense of 7+, rifles and machine guns with no armor penetration cannot pin them because they cannot hurt them. Use rifle grenade upgrades because they are Pen 1 and 1-inch blast. They can potentially hurt the damage value 7+ units, and against the Totem Core hordes, you will get more shots. Have snipers with an anti-tank cannon. That is what is needed to take out a Stahl troop and officer. Pen 2 with extra pen from the sniper rule. Take lots of small units rather than big ones. Small units won't be as much of a loss if they get charged and the unit is torn apart. In Bolt Action, it's rare for a whole unit to be killed at once except in combat, and there is a lot more combat units in Conflict 47. There's dogs, there's werewolves, there's bears wielding hammers and another one has a sickle. And if you want to hold an objective, 6 riflemen can do it about as well as 10. The trade-off is that you have more units to give up kill points, which is why I don't recommend playing with kill points, or the Bolt Action player will probably lose. Having lots of units will work as long as you have enough order dice in your collection. 9 units is what I've played in normal Bolt Action games. That's about the same number of units as a Conflict 47 versus Conflict 47 game, but at 1500 points. If you're throwing loads of relatively cheap units against the Conflict 47 armies, 13 or 14 units are in play on the Bolt Action player's side. That can be fine, as long as you have the dice. So you could win an attritional war. Play the mission, as long as it's not a kill point mission, because that's not so much fun. But the Conflict 47 Rift units are very expensive, so if they send a unit to an objective, you can send 3. Casualties may be high, but victory is what matters. The Soviets can do that especially well, as in Conflict 47's rules, they have the Fanatic rule to not lose combat when around the heroes of the Soviet bloc. And that unit has to be a non-rift infantry unit, like a unit from Bolt Action. Then even inexperienced Soviet conscripts with no advanced rift weaponry will endure the horrors of the Rift War and tie up, if not destroy, opposing monsters. Now an extra important part. The advice to make sure you can convince other people to play Conflict 47 against Bolt Action. Well, if you've played a lot of Bolt Action and you want to change up the faction rules to experience something different, this could be one way of doing it. I just mentioned the Soviet rule. You could do a Bolt Action versus Bolt Action, but now the Soviets have their brown noise wub wub rules and their British opponents have the intel advantage provided by Bletchley Park. You may want to get the big Soviet Bolt Action starter set. That can serve as an army in Conflict 47 or Bolt Action, or if you want 40k Imperial Guard Valhallan Ice Warriors in plastic. There are affiliates in the description for wargames. Like Fenris Workshop has discounted Bolt Action units for Canadians through my link. I mean, they're based in Canada, not that you can only buy Canadians through them. Or you can support me and buy directly through Warlord Games, with the Warlord Games affiliate link in the description. I don't mind which you use as long as you are happy. You could do a fun campaign of 3 games or more set in Poland. A Poland that looks very much like a French village. But you could have the first game as the opening of Operation Barbarossa. Bolt Action Germans against Bolt Action Soviets. The second game could be a Conflict 47 game, using one of the missions from Festung Europa. In it, the Totenkorps is fighting a mainly non-rift Soviet army, and it's a Conflict 47 game. And then the third game could be almost fully Conflict 47, with a couple of bolt action units that performed really well in the previous games, but of course they get up to veteran level for free. As long as they performed well, like the most valuable unit in the previous games. As the armies available in the 3rd edition of Bolt Action expand, and we get armies that 2nd edition Bolt Action had, like the French Resistance, the French Army, the National version, the Free version, and the Vichy version, or the Chinese Army, and soon the Italians. The Partisans, the French, and the Italians have PDF rules already in the 3rd edition of Bolt Action. They're available to download from Warlord Games, and you can use them in Conflict 47. I'm looking forward to the Armies of the British Commonwealth book, as in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the countries of the British Raj, and British Africa. Those cool nations. And I hope to use some of those units in my army. You could also have a Bolt Action army fight a Conflict 47 one as part of Conflict 47 lore. I don't think there's been any suggestion that the Chinese National Army has been given rift tech by the Americans, even as the Chinese Communists have been given some by the Soviets. Nor are the Chinese nationalists able to capture Japanese tech in any significant number. So running a standard Bolt Action force against the rift-empowered Conflict 47 Japanese army would not only be fun, it would be a lore accurate to the fictional version of events in the 1940s. The Partisans army list could be resistance within Poland, or German resistance fighting the Green Vault, or anti-Commonwealth forces who don't like the new direct rule from London. There are so many stories that you can make with this. So Conflict 47 needs to stay with the ability to use bolt action units. It extends the range of units available, it lets people start bolt action and then grow into Conflict 47, it lets a bolt action player fight a Conflict 47 player. And if you follow my advice, it will be fun. Even if it's difficult. Tanks move forward under fire. This is why we must keep going even when life is hard. Subscribe!